Hi, my name is Emily Howell. I'm a postdoctoral researcher at the Department of Life Sciences Communication at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And I'm going to talk briefly through some work I'm doing with colleagues in my department and collaborators in film production at the Science Communication Lab and their offshoot, the Wonder Collaborative, where we're trying to figure out how we can engage more diverse audiences in science stories through film. So first, some context on why we're focusing on film. There's some evidence that film can be particularly powerful for engaging with audiences, particularly in the ways that it uses narration and emotion to make information more likely to resonate and to stick with people. And we also know from some data from the Pew Research Center that documentaries and other science video programming are one of the most common sources of science news information for Americans, and they tend to also be one of the most trusted. They're up there with science and technology centers as most trusted to give accurate information about science. But we don't have much research on what the impact of film is for audiences, and this is in general, let alone for science topics, nor what the features are that shape that impact. And we also know that existing science programming tends to reach audiences that are already highly engaged with science. So these are audiences that are more likely to be white, to be male, and especially to be highly educated compared to most Americans. So there are many big research questions around what is the impact of film, how does that impact play out in terms of the outcomes and features that shape those outcomes, and then how can we use that understanding to try to reach more diverse audiences who aren't already highly engaged or don't highly identify with science. So when we started the Research Practice Partnership to start to explore how we can tell science stories in these more accessible and more compelling ways, we started with an evaluation funded by the Rita Allen Foundation of the Wonder Collaborative's recent film Human Nature, which explores the research and big questions around CRISPR, the gene editing tool. It goes from the basic science that led to the discovery of CRISPR in nature to the development and application of that tool for human gene editing purposes in particular. And finally, to the big questions about what the risks, potential benefits, and ethical considerations are concerning how we use that science and technology going forward. So since then, we've been able to turn that collaboration into an NSF-funded pilot project, where we're conducting experiments that test the different aspects of the film in ways to both further science communication research and then also directly inform film production. And our intention is to use these insights to then develop a new film together that has research integrated throughout the production process. In this pilot project, because we're still using the existing film, Human Nature, we're focusing on essentially two bigger questions that connect to some of the features that are particular to that film, to try to understand how these features can provide different avenues or angles for audiences to connect with the topic of gene editing and with science more broadly. So the first question we're looking at is, how does this type of storytelling that connects the basic research to potential applications of gene editing to big societal issues connected to that science, how does that type of storytelling and the features involved impact how audiences engage with the film and understand gene editing and science more broadly? The other feature that is unique to the film Human Nature is that the story isn't told through a single narrator. Instead, it's pieced together through interviews with many people, both scientists and non-scientists. And we're interested in how that diversity of voices shapes how audiences perceive gene editing, perceive the scientists themselves. For example, does it humanize them as they provide insights not into just their scientific work, but into the ethical questions connected to that work? And again, how all of these shape perceptions of science more broadly as well. So with this first question, we found through experiments in which people were randomly assigned to watch clips from the film in a particular order, that people who started with the chapter on sickle cell anemia and its impacts on people who have that genetic disease, that receiving that information first, followed by then a second chapter on the basic research behind the discovery of CRISPR, that people were then more likely to express that they experienced narrative transportation or sort of deep engagement in the discovery story as well. And this wasn't likely to be the case for the discovery story among those participants who started with that chapter and then moved on to how the tool could connect to treating sickle cell. So this first study was with a student sample, and to have greater diversity in a larger number, we're now running a study with a much larger national sample. And we're continuing to test whether introducing CRISPR through the context of treating sickle cell anemia or through the breakthrough provided through basic research, how that sort of framing at the beginning changes engagement for different audiences. We're also pairing that with our second question on what is the impact of different types of narrative voice in the film. And in this case, the way that we're testing that in more controlled ways is we hired actors to portray a scientist who will introduce the film using either the sickle cell or the CRISPR discovery context to frame the topic. And the actors are either white or black and male or female. So we'll see how the content they introduce and their appearance shapes the way that audiences engage with the film and with the content going forward. So we're looking forward to continuing this conversation and diving into more of any of the results at the poster session, where my colleagues and I are happy to answer any questions and hear your thoughts on how we can advance this kind of work to better engage people through science communication. Thank you.